Good evening, everyone. I am your host and instructor, Laney Shaughnessy, and welcome to Spindle TV, your best source for CNC CAD/CAM training videos. Spindle TV is brought to you by Digital Woodcarver, inspiring your creativity and providing you with the tools to create your own unique masterpieces. Welcome, everybody. I hope y'all all are doing well. I see Kevin in the room. Welcome, Kevin Wilkinson. Hopefully you guys and girls will start popping in and joining. I know it's an odd day with it being a Thursday for our class. But tonight we're going to just talk about models within the Vectric software, Vectric VCarve Desktop, Pro, and Aspire. But we're going to focus on two areas of models. We're going to be focusing on model slicing and model splitting. Now, model slicing can be done in all three of the softwares, Desktop, Pro, and Aspire. It's basically, imagine if you have a three-dimensional model, whatever it may be, whatever it is, and you're going to take and slice that model into individual pieces so that you can carve those individual pieces and then at the end of it, assemble them together to create that model. So imagine if I had an apple, that would sit on my desk. I would slice that apple in certain thicknesses and everything, and I would carve each of those individual pieces, and then I'd take those pieces over to my workbench. I'd reassemble that apple, glue them together and stuff, and have this kind of three-dimensional model that's sliced and everything. Welcome, Harry and Alan and Sam and Alan. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for popping in and stuff. But so that's slicing models. Now, splitting a model is actually taking a model, and exactly how it sounds, you're going to split it. You're going to draw a vector path to split that model along, and then that will allow you to basically separate that model into two parts to do whatever you want to do with it, as you'll see here. And hey, Jim, welcome. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday evening. Our classes are tonight. Our classes tonight because I was traveling on Monday. I didn't get back from the 4th of July holiday until around Tuesday, and then of course yesterday I was in Georgia all day doing a install and repairing things, and so today is our day. But we'll be back next week, Monday as scheduled, Monday at 7 and everything. We'll be back to that. So there's not a whole lot of prelude to or discussion on slicing models with you looking at me here, so why don't we jump over to the Vectric software and let's kind of talk about it over there. Now, I'm going to be working with Vectric VCarve Pro and Vectric Aspire tonight. Now, the splitting of a model is done in Aspire. It is an Aspire feature, so we are going to be working in Aspire. So if you don't have Aspire, please still sit through the class and everything. It's some good information and all if you ever do upgrade and everything. Just show you some of the functions that you can do. But when you talk about slicing a model, that can be done in all three, Vectric Desktop, VCarve Desktop, VCarve Pro, and Aspire. So let's get started first of all by jumping into our desktop software. And I'm basically just going to create a new file. And for this file, I no particular setup because I'm just showing you about the slicing tool and everything. So I'm going to go with a single-sided job that's 12 inches by 12 inches by 3/4. I'm going to be working off of the machine bed for my parts. I zero off on my wasteboard. If you're new and you're not familiar with my setup and stuff, you can touch off on the top of your Z on the top of your material, or the bottom, which would be like your tabletop or your wasteboard if you have a wasteboard on your table. I work off the wasteboard as my Z0 position. So the machine bed is my Z0. And then I work from the bottom left of my material, because on my fence, on my table, I have a 90-degree fence that all my boards reference against and stuff. So I work from the bottom left, but you can do this from center, left, right, doesn't matter. All right, so let's go ahead and click OK, and let's get in here. Now, generally, there's a few reasons why you would slice a model. If it is a full three-dimensional model and you don't have a way of carving it, imagine if I have a sphere or something and I want to carve the sphere and have the sphere sitting on my desk. You know, if I don't have a fourth axis or a rotary axis to create this, and all I have is my CNC table, then I could still create this part. I would just have to slice this sphere up and literally out of my 3/4 inch boards carve each individual slice and then assemble them together. I might have to do a little bit of fine sanding and things like that to clean it up after the glue and all that, after the glue up and stuff, but I could still create that model. So I'm going to import a model into the software. And now this model is not a sphere. It's going to be basically, I've got a bunch of different three-dimensional models and everything, but we're going to start off with this skull. Not too into skulls, but bear with me as we get through. This kind of just shows a good representation of the slices and everything. So we're going to come on into here, and I'm going to grab my skull here. We'll give it a second to bring that model in. Hey, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Tim and all them, Ken. And before I get too far into it while that model's coming in, because it is a big file and everything, I want to give a big shout out to Sam Engel, who made me this very cool tumbler, and you should be able to see it in the bottom right corner of the screen. It's got Spindle TV on it, the Yeti cup, and then it's got my name on the other side. Thanks, I love it. It keeps my drinks nice and cold, or hot if I was drinking something hot. All right, so let's take a look at this. Now, whenever we bring in a model into our software, we have to orientate that model. We've got to orientate it that in a way that we can work with it. So I'm going to come into my Z plane here, my Z plane, and if you notice, we're looking at the skull's head, right? And now that doesn't give me a whole lot of detail, and I wouldn't want it to bring it in that way. So I want to come to the front over here on the initial orientation. I want to come to the front because I want to see the face, okay? And I want to center the model. Now, when I click center model in the orientation, if we go into the y-axis view or x-axis view, either one, you'll see that half of my model is below this black line, which is the Z plane here, the center of my board. This little red line outline is showing my 3/4 inch board. And this center line here, this black line, is my Z plane. And so when you center the model, it centers it on that Z plane as well as in the middle of your board also. And now, if this was a two-sided project or something and my model was two sides, I would want it split like this. I would want one side on one side of the board, one side on the other. But I'm not doing that here. I'm basically taking this entire model and I want to slide the Z-plane down, which essentially brings the model up, and I want the model above the Z-plane. Okay, I want the model above the Z-plane and everything. So let's go back to our Z view here. And so we have essentially this three-dimensional skull that is literally, I wouldn't be able to carve unless I had a piece that was 4 or 5 inches thick, because that's how tall this model is. I wouldn't be able to carve it. I wouldn't be able to create this replica of this skull on my table. One, I don't have the Z clearance on my table. Two, I don't have a thick enough piece of material, and plus, when carving and everything, I wouldn't be able to get the side detail. That bit's coming straight down, and so I wouldn't be able to get that side detail very well and everything. And I want that side detail and stuff. So what we're going to do is I want to make sure that any data that's below my zero plane is, discarded. Basically, what that's going to do, if we look here at my model, if I turn in the Y view, the back part of the skull here is going to be off. I could essentially, kind of keep that by not discarding what's below the zero plane. And that'll bring my whole model in. And I think I'll do that. I'll not discard the below zero plane. I'll just click OK. And so that's going to bring in this model. And so let it orientate itself. All right. And now, so what you see here is we've got this representation of this model, and the software has a bit of and let it regenerate. It's going to pixelate a lot, but the software has no real way of creating the undercuts and everything in the model and all. So I'm going to get the main detail and everything on my skull here, but my side, I'm not going to have that rounded dome and stuff. I'd most likely have to come back and do a little bit of Dremel work or something like that. But the way the software brings the model in, I'm not going to be able to get that full rounded dome in the back of the skull and things. Now, I could, essentially, I could have split this model and brought it in mid on the Z-plane, so it created both halves. And I could then slice both of those halves and everything, and then assemble it together to get that back dome. So that's one way to do it, and let's do that. Let's take for a second here, and let me delete this out of here, and let's bring that skull in again, because I want to create both halves. Now this is a single-sided job, so what's going to happen is it's going to create both halves on the top of the board here. So let it bring it in again. Give it a second to generate again, because again, it's a big model. And welcome Ken and Ronnie and William and Sylvia and Tim and Peter and everybody. All right, so once again, I'm going to click front. I want to orientate this to the front. I want to center this model. And so, I have my model now is split. If we go into that Y view again, clicking this Y icon in the top right hand corner, you can see that I have my my model is split into two essential components and stuff here. So now this time I'm going to check off the box that says create both sides. Now if I had this job set up as a two-sided project, then it would create both sides with the top on the front of the board, the top of the board, and the second part of the model on the bottom of the board. So when I was flipping back and forth, but I don't have it. It's a single-sided job, so it's going to create both halves on the top of my board. So I'm going to click create both sides, and I'm going to click OK. And that's going to go through, and that's going to generate the model. And we'll give it a second to orientate and flip those two sides around. Now, when it brings it in, it's going to look super weird and everything. Like it's almost like the skull is half cut off, and it looks like he's got a big old. It looks like almost like a skull chair in a sense. And what it is we're seeing both sides literally on top of each other, because the skull V1 bottom and the skull V1 top are both visible. And we can only work with one at a time, so we're going to turn off the bottom for right now, and there's our top half there. So we can see our top half. Now let me turn that top half off and turn the bottom on, so you can see that as well. And on that bottom, we have the back part and the dome and everything, on that bottom half and everything. So that's going to be the second half of the model, and it's pixelated right now. Let it kind of catch up, but we're going to have that dome kind of back. All right, let's get back to our top view or our top of our model, our first piece here, and let's look at what we would do to slice this model up. Now, again, on this model, I can't really carve it like this because even my top half here, I'm still a bit thick. And if we look at this in a side view, you know, coming from down the y-axis and all, and let's go down the x-axis so it's kind of sideways here. Let's turn it sideways. We'll look down the x-axis here and everything. Let it flip around. Work with me. All right. So essentially, you know, I've got my top half and my bottom half, and it still shows some of the bottom half and everything in there. And that's just you know, discarded data. That's data that's not going to be created and all. But now I want to slice this model up so I can literally take my 3/4 inch material, and I would probably have, you know, maybe 4 or 5 pieces depending on how many slices I make. I would carve each of these individual slices on each of those individual pieces of wood. And when it's all said and done, I would come back and I would take all those individual card parts and assemble them together into a full model. So to slice a model, we have an icon under the 3D modeling tools that is slice. Slice the visible model into individual components. And so when I open up that tool, first off, it's going to tell me my model thickness, and it's going to also tell me my material thickness. So it's just letting me know the two. And the model thickness is the visible model. So right now the top half is about 3.25, you know, about 3¼ inches tall. Well, now I have a choice. When I'm slicing the model, do I want just a certain thickness on each of the pieces, or do I want a number of slices? Now, if I did a certain thickness, let's say I did 3/4 inch thick, you know, slices and everything. Well, imagine this getting divided into 3/4 inch pieces. On my very top, the lip and the teeth and the little nose bone here and everything, and the nasal cavity and all, those would be individual little pieces and stuff that would carve out. And I don't want that. I want most of the face here, I want most of that as one slice and then a couple others. So instead of using the thickness and getting 5 slices, I'm going to use a number of slices, and I'm going to turn that down to 4 slices. Let's see here. No, I can't do 4 slices. Let's see here. I could do 4 slices, but I would have to work with at least a 1-inch thick piece of material because the model slices are 0.148 or 0.8148 inches thick. So, and I don't think it allows decimals. 3.5 inch or 3.5. Yeah, it doesn't do decimals. Just checking. Just checking. All right, so I'm not gonna do that. Let's see if I can come up here and let's see if I can get myself. Top slice thickness is only 0.25. Let's give myself a little bit more. 0.625. All right, let's go with that. Let's see what I know for a fact I'm most likely going to have some problems around the nasal bone. But let's go ahead and slice this model up with 5 slices and let's see what we're at. If not, I'm going to have to go back and change my material thickness to 1-inch thick material. So I'd have to plane some material down or resaw some material down to get that 1 thick. Or I'd have to glue up some pieces and all. But let's slice it up and let's see what we come up with here. So now, notice that that model's stretched because we are seeing now the 5 individual slices, but we're also seeing still that top model. It's still checked off. So I want to turn that off automatically. I want to, turn that off automatically and get back to my individual slices here. And so now this model has been split into individual slices. So I'm going to go ahead and turn them off one by one. And we're going to take a look at those. Oops. If I quick check in the same box, we'll be good to go. All right, so if we take a look at this, and we'll tilt this a little bit this way, slice one is basically going to be kind of that back part. It's almost, just kind of a profile cut. There is some model cutting on the side with our tapered bit. We'll get that model detail on the side, but it's essentially flat. That first piece is, essentially going to be a flat piece. Let's turn slice one off and let's look at slice two. This is my second board that I'm putting on the table. And the second board, again, still a flat slice there on the top. Got some little carving detail on the side, but nothing real major yet there. So that's slice two. Slice three. Almost looks like the Iron Man mask right there. Go Iron Man. There you go. It's a shame that we won't be seeing much of him anymore. So slice three, now we're getting into the back part of the cavity of the eyes and things, and we're getting a little bit of that jawbone detail now in slice three. So our fourth board is going to be most of the face. We have most of the face here and everything. And then slice five, what I was talking about, working with 5 slices, all I have are these 3 small pieces here. The top of the nasal cavity, the nose bone, and then this 4 teeth right there. So those would be small parts to try to profile cut and everything. So I really don't want to do that. And so I don't want that to be that way. I need this part to be a little bit thicker. So what that's going to force me to do, is it's going to force me to increase the thickness of my material. And I'm going to work with a number of slices, and I want to basically break this down into 4 slices and everything. And so we'll slice this model up. And let it go ahead and generate those 4 new slices on the number of slices here. Each of my slices are going to be roughly 0.8 inches thick. And I could go in and I could scale this skull down and things like that. But now let's take a look at these 4 slices here. So the main one I'm focusing on is slice number 4. So let's turn off 1, 2, and 3. And we will see now that slice 4 is more of the face, and I can deal with that. I can do that model cut and that profile cut and everything. I've got more material to work with for that profile cut. Now, when I created these 4 slices, I also told it to create the vector lines for that model. So each of my slices has their profile vector lines and stuff. Each of my slices that I can use when I'm doing, use the model as the boundary or the selected vector as the boundary and things. And so in the 2D view, we're seeing, if I had all of the models turned on, you would see the model grayscale in its entirety and everything, as well as the outline vector lines. And they're grouped together. I can ungroup those, so we have those individual vector lines and all. But if you notice up here that the software also created the sliced layers for me. So I can turn off the layers, and I have, if I come in here and turn off all my layers and all, now I'm working with the layer that I want to work with, as well as the vector lines, that I want to work with for the profile cuts or whatever the case may be, and things. And so it not only does it create the individual slices, but it creates the individual layers, for all those slices and stuff that we would do. And now you're going to see there's some extra, extra vectors here, right here in this group, and I'm going to go ahead and delete those. Because they don't belong, because what I want are just the vectors for the new 4 slices that I made, and everything. So now that we have those, we would come over to our tool paths and stuff, and I'm going to actually turn on all 4 slices. turn that one off. All 4 slices here. I'm going to turn them all on. I want them to all be visible and everything. And when I'm working and creating my toolpath, my profile cut and my model cuts and everything, when I come into my model, I'm getting this warning saying, hey, your model is exceeding the material thickness. And that is a fact because it's showing the whole model and everything. So one of the things is we can't have this error here. So we need to make sure that we have the active layer that we want to work with on. The active layer that we want to work with on. And we also want to go in our modeling tab and we want to uncheck all of the layers that we're not working with at that particular point in time. So of course I would probably start off with slice 1, and so that would be the only visible model that I would want. And so now my model is thickness is 0.814, and of course, yes, it is still an error because remember, I have to change my board thickness. So I don't have the error anymore. I can now carve this 0.8148 inch thick piece, without any issue. Now, the first slice here and everything, now that my model, I have to do this, I won't have to do the material setup each time, but on that first time I need to go in so I could change my material thickness and stuff. But now when I'm creating my model, I can, or my toolpath, not my model, when I'm creating my toolpath, I am going to basically use the selected vector as the boundary because I don't want to waste all the material carving this 12 inch by 12 inch piece. I just want to carve around that model area. But the one thing that I want to do, I want to make sure of, is that I let my bit go past these selected vectors because I want to be able to get those details and stuff on the side. I don't want the bit being stopped by that boundary line. So I want to let the bit go past a certain amount. And in this case, I'd probably allow it to bypass probably the diameter or twice the diameter of the bit. Now I'm using a 16th inch diameter bit here, which I don't need to do. I can change that to my 1/8 inch diameter bit, and I am going to let it go out past the diameter of the bit by 0.27. I'm going to let it go past that vector line. I said I'm getting my words tied up. I got a head cold, forgive me. I can allow that bit to go past the vector lines by 0.27, a little bit more than the diameter of that bit. Laney Shaughnessy, 0.127, because it's an 1/8 inch diameter bit. Because I don't need to let it go past, but I do want to let it get by there, a bit and everything. So I would go through and make sure selected vectors as the boundary, and I would go ahead and notice that I've got a grouping here, and I've got two things going on. I've got a vector line going around this top part here, but I also have a vector line going around the bottom. So if I ungroup these and we look at these one by one, I've got this vector line that's going around the outside profile of the bit, and then I have this inner vector line. Well, the one that I want is this outside vector line here. If we were to, again, look at my model piece and all, if I, actually, hold on a second. Yes. If I selected this entry one here, then I wouldn't be able to get this to this lower part of the model. And this lower part of the model is this area down in here, right on the side of the cranium and everything. So I need to make sure that I have the correct boundary line, the selected vector, the correct selected vector chosen, because that is what I'm using as my machining limit boundary, selected vector. So we'll go ahead and this would be, I would just, basically call this slice 1, let's call it side 1, slice 1.125 tapered ball nose, TBN, and I would calculate that. Now, this is just the model cut, the 3D finish cut and everything. I could do a rough cut, and all, but there's not a whole lot of material that would be roughed out on this, and everything. And so with that model, and let me get rid of this solid color here. Let's go with a maple. When we excuse me, when we preview this cut, you can see that my bit is cutting deep, right? My bit is cutting deep because a finish cut does not do passes. It goes straight to the bottom of the model. You know, when it's carving back and forth and things, it goes straight to the bottom of the model. And I definitely don't want to do that. I need to alleviate some of this material around here with a rough cut so that it'll at least remove a lot of that waste, because I do not want my bit, my 1/8 inch ball nose bit, plunging down 0.8 inches thick and trying to, you know, hog out that material when it's, you know, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth and everything. So I've got my finish cut in there, but I do need to come in and do a rough cut on this. And again, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch end mill. I'm going to use the selected vector as the boundary, and I'm going to let it go past that boundary. We'll go past the boundary a little bit, and I'm going to be rastering. Now, it depends on how my grain is running. So if the grain is running, like in the picture here, along my y-axis, then I would raster along the y-axis. If my grain was running along the x, I'd raster along the x. I always want to carve with the grain and everything. And one of the things that I can do is this flat area. There's no sense in you know, machining that flat area because the top of my board is flat. Now, if I would have placed my model slightly under the material because I wasn't sure if I had any little unevenness on that surface, then I would just, you know, surface the whole model and everything, and that would ensure that it would be flat all the way across and stuff. But with my finish cut, I don't need to be doing this flat work. For my rough cut, I'm going to let it do the rough cut work and everything, but I'm not going to do the finish. So we're going to go back and I'll show you that and everything, because there's a lot of flat areas on these first 3 slices. So we got our selected vectors as the boundary, 0.27, letting it go past that vector line. I'm going to raster along the y-axis here, and I'm going to calculate this. And let's come in and take a look at this rough cut. So you can see the rough cut is just literally removing all of that material away from around the skull, where that 1/8 inch bit's got to get down to and everything and all. So we're going to go ahead, and if we preview that cut, you know, it's going to be removing all that material and everything and kind of roughing it out. That's kind of basically clearing that opening away for my finish bit to work. Now my finish bit doesn't have to work so hard. And so if we come into here, remember what I said about the vectors and all. Well, if we look at this vector, this inner vector that I said that we're not going to use, this inner vector is actually outlining the flat area here. And there's no sense in my bit going back and forth, and milling out this flat area unless I was absolutely unsure that my board wasn't playing quite flat, you know. Maybe that it was, maybe it has a little bit of variation in it, and I want to mill it flat, then I would. I'd just let it go just like it is. But, you know, I'm pretty confident that the board that I'm going to put on my material, the surface is flat. So I am going to select that selected vector there. And when I calculate this toolpath, you'll notice that it's doing only the outside areas, the model areas and all, and leaving that flat area alone. And that's, you know, I don't need to be machining that. That's just a lot of wasted time. We're you know, optimizing the toolpath a bit. So let's go ahead and preview that toolpath there, and we got that, you know, bit going around and just basically touching up that outer edge. All right, so that would be slice 1. Now we, again, rinse and repeat. We come over here, we turn the model off for slice 1 and turn the model on for slice 2 in our modeling tab. We come over and let me rename this this toolpath here. This is going to be side 1 slice 1 rough 0.25 end mill, and we're gonna put that at the top of the list there. So we got our finish and our rough. If you want to be specific, we could actually rename this, and we could put the word finish in there so we can be consistent. So that's that. Now we could come in and we're going to do it again. We're going to come in, and now we have our second model on, visible and stuff, and we're going to come in and do a rough cut, because this is a whole second board now, because we got 4 boards that we're going to be dealing with. Everything, all the parameters are going to be the same in all that, and we're going to go ahead and calculate that toolpath. And I probably could have named the toolpath in there before I calculated, but let's do it here. I'll do that in the next one. This is going to be side 1. The reason why I got side 1 in there, because remember we have the back of the cranium and stuff too. This is slice 2 rough 0.25 end mill. Rinse and repeat, you know. And once that's done, we go in and calculate the finish cut. Everything, all the parameters are going to be the same, but I will name it here, might as well. Side 1, slice 2, finish 0.125 ball nose. Click calculate, and go ahead and let it go through. Now, most likely, and I'm going to jump, we're not going to do slice 3 right now. You guys get the idea. It's rinse and repeat, where we've got a rough cut and a finish cut for each of the slices. But I want to come up here to slice 4. I want to come into slice 4 and everything, and I want to talk about this. And let me turn these 2 toolpaths off here for a second. I want to talk about that now. I'm using an 1/8 inch ball nose bit, you know, for the most of the work on those other slices, because there's not a whole lot of detail. I don't need to get really any detail, but on this part here, there's some detail, you know, around the gum line and things like that, and everything, and all of these, you know, within the nasal cavity and all that stuff. So I may want to just use a 1/16 inch tapered ball nose bit on this slice when I'm calculating it stuff and everything. Now, once each of the 3D rough and 3D finish cuts are made for each of the slices, and the whole point of saying that, let me step back for a second. The whole point of saying that about the changing bits, you don't have to use the same bit every single time. I've only used the 1/8 inch ball nose bit because there's not a lot of detail on those other slices. But on this slice, there's a lot of detail, and I want to get that detail nice and clean, so I'd probably use a 1/16 inch, a smaller bit. Now, that being said, that clarity being said, coming back to what I was about to say, once all of the slices, 3D rough and 3D finishes, are created, I would then go back and create the profile cut. The profile cut on those vectors. I'd come back and it would be this bottom vector here. I'd create the profile cut, cutting all the way through my material with my 1/4 inch end mill. And I want to be on the outside of the line. Now, a lot of that material has already been removed because I allowed the rough cut to remove all of that material. So if we came back in, and let's come back over to slice 1 here for a second. And you know, when we did that cut and everything on here, we have all of this open space, and my profile bit is going to be cutting in here against the side of the model. So there's no meat in there for me to be worried about. So on my profile toolpath, I do not need to start at 0. I can start down in the cut. You know why? If I did, you know, right now 1 inch thick, with my 1/4 inch end mill, and my 1/4 inch end mill, I have it set to take a 1/16 of an inch per pass and everything. That's 16 passes, but the first 14 of those are carving air, you know, so there's no sense in that. So I know my model thickness was cut down to 0.8184. I could go there, but what I'm going to do is I am going to give myself a little bit of air, and I'm just going to go down to 0.8. That's going to be my start depth. And then I'm going to cut from point 8 to point 2. That's going to give me my 1 inch thick. Okay, so it's going to do it in 4 passes, and I want to be on the outside of the cut. And now I've got to think about some tabs and everything. Think about some tabs and stuff. So I'm not going to add tabs for the preview of the cut for the first one, but I'll come back and add them in just 2 seconds. But let's calculate this toolpath without any tabs here. And let's go ahead and preview that toolpath cut. And you'll see that 1, 2, 3, and 4 to cut that part out. And let's double click on this. Waste of material here. And so we have our, our front side and everything, on our piece, our first piece of this skull and all. Now, let's go back in here and let's add some tabs. Let's add some tabs. I would probably, if I were adding tabs to this, I'm definitely going to be staying away from anywhere that is going to be compromising for me to have to sand and things like that. So I'll probably end up putting maybe 1 on each side of the top of the skull here, and then possibly 1 on these flats right here on the bottom side. I wouldn't want to go any more than that for that. Now, on my ramping and stuff, I do want. I'm a big advocate now of ramping, for extending the life of the bit, and hopefully you've seen that in the past couple of classes where we started including ramping in our toolpath and stuff. It's good for the bit. It's good for the the project and stuff. But I'm going to use a spiral ramp. Generally, you see me use a zigzag and everything, but I'm going to use a spiral ramp for this. And what that means is as that bit is going around and around, it's dropping. It's dropping with each pass and everything, and it's taking a few thousandths, and it's just getting lower and lower and lower as it cuts the part out. And it's a spiral ramp. It's literally, think of like a tulip bowl flushing. That water's going around and around and down at the same time. Now, if you've been with me early on, with classes and everything, you'll know that every time I use a spiral ramp, I go back up to my tool up here, and I make sure that my tool's feed rate and my tool's plunge rate match each other. It's the only time that I'm going to have them match one another. I want that bit to be going down and around at the same speed. I don't want it to have to slow down just to drop a little bit, slow down to drop a little bit. I want it to be the same consistent speed and everything. So I want to make sure those match. So I am noticing I'm editing the tool. I'm not hitting select and changing it in my tool database because I'm only editing the tool temporarily for this tool path. I don't want to change it in my tool database. I don't want to change my default settings. I just want to change this tool for this tool path. So when I click OK, it's gonna change that for this tool path. But when I go to grab this tool again out of my tool database, I have not affected my default settings and stuff on it. So if we were to calculate that and everything, you'll see that we have this. Let me see if I can get this turned and orientated properly here. Looks like the toolpath is cutting through the skull, but I assure you it's not. It's just the way that toolpath is just being visible. But you'll notice we have these light blue lines going into the dark blue line. The dark blue line is my final pass, of course. But as it's going around, it's going down. And it's just a continuous flow, dropping every few thousandths of an inch as it goes constantly until it cuts it out. So we would do that for each of the projects and everything, or each of those 4 slices and everything. And models, where I get my models from is I like using, when I'm looking for different models and all 360-degree models that I would actually intentionally slice, because it's not a tool that you would use a lot, but there's some really cool things. And if we looked at CNC model slicing, and we looked at some of the images that are out there and stuff, you can see some of the cool slice examples that they have, on Google. Give it like this car here. They've taken this 360-degree car and they've sliced it into individual slices and everything. And evidently there wasn't a whole lot of detail with that car to begin with, but still, it was a pretty cool slice that they did there. Whatever this is here, individual slice. A better example would be, like this dinosaur head. You've probably seen that running around online and stuff, where they've individually sliced this model, cutting all those individual parts so that they can assemble them together to create that 3D rendering, that wall mount or whatever it might be. But there's a lot of cool reasons for slicing. Here's another excellent example, like this pumpkin here. Slicing it up to work with that. Now, slicing is a common term that you would generally see when you're doing 3D printing. They slice those models. They slice their models up and everything when they do 3D printing and all to build those layers and layers and layers for that 3D part. And essentially, that's what we're doing with the CNC. We're slicing that model up so we can do those individual layers and layers and layers. But it's not building as it cars, right? We're carving all of those out of individual boards, and then we're assembling them together, gluing and assembling them together after the fact and everything. So there's, I probably didn't use the right keywords for, let's see here. Let me go back up here and change my keywords real quick. 3D CNC. That one didn't. CNC, let's put a space where things belong. 3D sliced model. Get rid of this word, sliced. And there we go. So you can see some examples of, slicing a model. This is one of the cooler ones, slicing the model up and everything. Now, there's that dinosaur head, very popular model to slice. This one's kind of a unicorn or horse head. Horse head looks to be. But there's a lot of different reasons for slicing a model. Yep, that one looks a little realistic, right? They must have painted that and everything. That's freaky looking. But there's some good examples of why you would slice a model and everything, and some cool things. So when I'm looking for a model, one of the websites I like to go to is Turbosquid. Turbosquid is a 3D model sharing platform where you can find free models, but you can also buy models and things. And so if I come up to Turbosquid here and I go into 3D models, I have different categories that I could choose from and stuff. And I can even also just browse the free 3D models and stuff. But, let's say that I go into plants for whatever reason. Not sure why we'd want to do a 3D sliced model of a plant, but yeah, why would we want to do a 3D sliced model of a plant? Let's go back to, let me find a different category. But that'd be cool. We could do that too. But man, those little leaves and all, those would be small parts for sure. But let's see here. Let's go into vehicles. Animals would have been cool too. We could have went to animals. Now, these models, give it a second to catch up and everything. These models are full 3D rendered models and everything, and some of them are free, some of them are not. Okay, so be very mindful of that. And these models can be used for many things like embossing and stuff, and we'll talk about embossing a little bit maybe at the end or something, but generally you would use it for slicing or embossing and everything. But if you don't have a need, or you don't really see a need for slicing a model and stuff, don't be spending $300 or $100 and everything. There are plenty of free options that you can, you know, um, that you can work with. And so on price up here, I can go and I can, you know, click on free. There's 2,100 free models in there. Frog, yep, Michael Smith says a frog and everything. But there's, you know, 2,100 models and things in here. And in the images and all, it'll show you MA, OBJ, FBX, Max, OBJ, FBX, other, you know, OTH. These are the different model file types. So you want to make sure you're working with either OBJ, 3DS, STL, and things, because some of these other models you wouldn't be able to work with. So make sure you're grabbing the model for that you're wanting to work with. And so, you know, and make sure that the model is something that, you know, whatever it might be, you know, that you'd want to work with and stuff. Now, on the model, let's get into the different views and everything. So this particular model, it's a full 3D rendering, and this particular model comes in, let's just do the 360 and see if it'll let it build up that 360. But, you know, it's a full 360 degree model. Now, I could carve this in a flat plane if I wasn't doing slicing. I could carve this in a flat plane by using embossing. But embossing is an Aspire feature. Desktop and VCarve do not have, or Desktop and Pro don't have model slicing and everything. Or I'm not, sorry, I'm getting my words mixed up. It doesn't have embossing, but Aspire does. And so it would be, you know, probably a cool model to, you know, do. Notice this model is very rigid around the edges and everything. The person that created it didn't really spend a whole lot of time in smoothing some of these polygons and things out of the, you know, the model and stuff. If we get kind of a close-up view of the door, you can see that mirror there has got the polygon lines and stuff. It's not really smooth. Now, we could smooth that out some in the Vectric software, but I generally try to go, you know, I generally try to look for a model that is, you know, pretty clean and stuff from the get-go. And, you know, if I liked that that design or something, and there wasn't another model like it, then hey, you know, I'd grab it, type of thing. But I generally try to look and see, you know, if there, you know, a model is pretty clean. Like this one is very low polygon, so I would probably never use that. So when you're looking at these models, look at the detail of them, because that's what you get. You know, you're going to download what you get and everything. When we look at this model here on this Meister, very smooth lines and everything. So when we look at the actual model itself, let's get into the model view. Model view, super smooth model, right? And that's the kind of detail that I want, you know. And if I was slicing this up, you know, to reassemble it and everything, you know, I wouldn't want to deal with all those polygon lines and stuff like that. But, you know, that might be a cool model to slice up. Now, this model format comes in FBX and OBJ. OBJ is a file format we can work with in the Vectric software. So, you know, when we're downloading this, we would download the, we would click on download, and you have an account, you log in, it's free to have an account. You would log in and you would choose OBJ and download it, you know. So Turbosquid is a pretty cool place, and just for kicks and giggles, let's back up one here and let's type in frog, because old Mike Smith typed that in there. And let's see what we come up with, a frog model. Frogs, I would assume, are pretty popular, so there's probably quite a few different models of frogs and things in there. It just depends on what we want to, what kind of frog we want, you know. I try to steer clear of models that have these extended parts and things out, which is fine. That's just one slice, right? You know, it's in there and all, but you know, maybe the tip of the tongue is going to be a little small piece of wood or things like that, you know, in that particular model. So I'm very selective of the type of models I use, but you can slice. It's just like, again, like 3D printing. You know, you just got to be mindful of the parts that are getting cut out. They could be very small parts, and I don't want to be dealing with, you know, gluing, you know, a bunch of small little pieces and everything together, like the toes and all that. I would make sure that those feet, you know, were one slice, and then the legs would be the next, and so on and so forth and all. Because remember, we're cutting all those individual parts and stuff out. But yeah, so there's frogs in there, old Mike. All right. So I believe we've got kind of slicing down. It's not a whole lot to it. We're either slicing by thickness or by the number of slices we want for our model. And we'll make sure you create the vector boundary vectors, create the boundary vectors when you create the models, when you slice it up, so that you have those vectors for your profile cuts. It's important and everything. But I don't know if any of the digital woodcarver customers that are joining us tonight, I don't know if any of you have ever done slicing or ever played around with it. But heck, give it a try, see what you think, and have some fun with it and come up with something pretty cool. All right. Now, I'm going to get out of Pro here for the moment, and I'm going to switch over to Aspire, because I want to talk about Aspire's modeling features. And one of their modeling features, we're not going to recover slicing because we just did that, and it's the same for all three programs. But now I want to talk about splitting a model. Now, splitting a model is literally like taking a vector line and drawing out a line where you want to cut, and taking a pair of scissors and cutting it up. So what I want to do is I'm going to bring a model into the drawing here. All right, I'm going to size this up real big. And I want to mirror this model. I want to flip it the other direction. I don't know why I want it pointing left, but imagine on this model here that I wanted two heads, one facing left, one facing right. And I wanted to have a plaque or some kind of flat area in the middle here without all of this mane and stuff. Well, I could take this model and I could go into my drawing tools, and let me get the model on the board. Let me get it sized down just a little bit. I could take and go into my drawing tools and grab a polyline tool, and I could create, basically I'm creating a cut line. So I could literally, you know, let's say that I want to probably cut from here to here, you know, on this. And with that, I could select my model, I could select my polyline, and if I go into my modeling tools, I can split that model. And so when I click that, you're going to see that we have two slices here, A and B, AA and AB. Now I have two halves here, so my one half there and my other half there, there, and I could basically essentially now, you know, turn that half off, and let's get this straightened out a bit. Don't need that vector line there anymore. And I could take and mirror. Let's go into our mirror tool and create a mirror copy, and flipping it to the right. You know, and I could, you know, essentially sew those two pieces back together, or I could space them apart if I want some kind of plaque in the middle of them. You know, I'd orientate them, you know, vertical as much as possible. Let's see if I can get those two lined up Now, I want a pivot point. I want to pivot up here. And I want to bring that bottom side out a little bit. Nope, not that much. All right. And let's move over here. Let's do it a little bit faster. Drag it over here. Drag this over here. I want to make sure both of those pieces are perfectly aligned with one another. So up and down, I want to make sure they are perfectly aligned vertically. And then I could come in with my rectangle tool. And I could come in and draw a rectangle, go into my modeling tools on my, and let's split the view here. Let's look at our 3D view. In our modeling tools, I could go into the create shape tool, create a flat shape, and start building that up. Wanting it to merge with the other models and everything. I want to build it up a little higher. I'm going to tilt it there. I'm going to build it up a little higher. So I'm going to keep bumping it up. Until I get to the surface height. Oops. Overshot it. Bear with me a second. What's my height there? 0.5108. 0.5108. Okay. Now, what I'd want is, let's go ahead and close that. Now on this plaque here, you know, that I have in the middle, I'd want it to blend with those two models, right? And I want to get rid of these, little mane hairs and stuff that are there and everything. So I want it to kind of blend in with those two models and stuff on that plaque. So that's my sculpting tool. You know, on my sculpting tool, I would have my model components, all except for that one. I'd end up having to, you know, create a copy of those because I would never bake my originals together. But, you know, in order to sculpt and clean those up, I would need to bake these together so I can go into sculpting. I may even just, you know, make the, you know, I may come in and cut that model off even further, you know, on the horse and all. But let's say I wanted that width and everything, and I got to go out and clean these up. Then what I need to do is I need to make, I'm going to group these three together, and I'm going to make a duplicate of them. I'm going to duplicate that group, and I'm going to, oops, sorry guys. I'm going to come in and create a new level, insert a new level, and I'm going to bring that group up into that level, and then turn off that my original. I always keep my originals intact and everything. And so now that I have, you know, this group here, I can go ahead with them selected. I can bake them together into one component and stuff. Now I can go into my sculpting tools, and I'm going to twiddle my view first. It's a weird name for it, but twiddle means move. I'm going to move my view first, and I'm going to turn this in a way that I can start kind of working and cleaning things up because I want to do some smoothing and stuff and everything. So with my view twiddled, now I can come in and, you know, I'm going to work on one side at a time, and then I'll work my way around. But I want to take my diameter, make it a little bit bigger, you know, in here, and I want to come in and I want to start kind of smoothing, you know, these areas out and, you know, blending them in. So kind of just start smoothing these areas out, and I can turn my strength up a little bit. Let me give myself a little bit more strength on that and start smoothing so that they blend together. And if I need to remove any material or smudge any material or anything like that, I can do that as well. You know, if I need to come through and remove any material, but I don't like the remove tool too much because it takes too much out. So let me undo that. We have an undo brush that will allow me to undo that. The only thing about the undo brush, it undoes everything, but that's fine. I do have a smudge tool. A smudge tool allows me to smear. Let's smooth first. Get rid of this. Let me get rid of this big hump again. Let me turn my power up a little bit more. There we go. And then I'm just gonna, you know, on my transition here, you know, coming up on the neck, I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna do, you know, too much, but I could use my smudge tool, and I could start kind of pulling, you know, some of this down and everything, depending on, you know, what I want to do. And I'd like to try to keep my main line of my square, my rectangle. I'd like to try to keep that somewhat intact and stuff. So generally probably just smooth and pull that together. And then I twiddle my view, and that means it allows me to kind of rotate. And go back again to that smoothing, and can start working on this side. You know, and now if we go ahead and keep those and click OK, and if we go into our you know, front view, we could do some kind of nice little saying or something, and of course we'd clean this up, make it look a little bit better and all. But you know, we could do whatever, you know, you think of like a headboard, or I don't know, all kinds of things. But so that's slicing a model, but let's or splitting a model, but let's split this model even more, and really show you the power of splitting and stuff. What I'm going to do is we're going to go to our 3D view here. I'm sorry, our 2D view, like an idiot. And I'm going to take on my model here, I want the heads to bow down a little bit more, not be out so much. I want them to bow down some. So I'm going to take my polyline tool, or my curve tool, actually I'll create a curve tool. And I'm going to basically right here around the neckline, I'm going to basically outline the head here. And I would do this before I did my mirror and copyright, so they were both exactly the same, but I'm just doing one side to show you. So now that I have that polyline there, I can go back into my modeling tools, and with this model selected and with this polyline selected, I can split that. And mine would be the you know, the original horse. And so now I basically have the horse head here and the horse back and stuff. And so now I can take this horse head and I can come in and double click on it. I can grab my pivot point and put it right up here at the base of the head here, and I can pivot that to get the horse's head to bow. And of course, what got split right there? All right, it cut the model there, so we're going to end up deleting those two components. That's fine. So I'm going to bow his head down just a little bit, right like that. Now let's take a look at this model here, and let's look at this horse head. The two components aren't merging together properly. You see how I got this kind of funky buildup, this green area here. It looks like almost like a mass building up on his neck. My two components are not merging together properly and stuff, and so we need to go ahead and merge them properly. So that means we got to change the combine mode. So instead of an add combine mode, I'm going to right click and change it to merge. Okay, so that way it'll blend and stuff. You know, we could merge, you know, this one as well. Don't need to, but the first one is all we really needed to do. But now I have, you know, this horse's head bowing more, but it doesn't look natural because I've got, if we tilt this to the side now, I've got this defining the line. It's not really blending in that well and everything. So once again, I come back in here on my horse head component, and I'm going to make a copy of this. I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to move it down. One of the original, I'm going to move down to my bottom here, and I'll go ahead and move it into that bottom layer just so I have it and all. But now I want to, once again, bake these two into one component, because we're going to have to anyway in order to do details and stuff. And so when I bake those two together, now I can go into my sculpting tool. And again, I'm going to twiddle my view because I really kind of want to focus my view up here on the neck and everything, this neckline. And I'm basically just going to smooth things out. Now, I don't need a whole lot of power on this. I don't want to change too much of the detail and everything, and I don't need the diameter that big. I just need a fine line point because all I'm doing is smoothing that transition line out and everything around the neck. Nice sculpting line there and everything. And getting rid of that. Okay, so oops. Click OK on that. And so now if we were to click OK. Now if we were to look at this, you know, we could have the horse's head being bowed down a little bit more and things. So slicing or splitting, should I say, not slicing, splitting a model is pretty cool. There's a lot of reasons or a lot of things that we could do. We could take a lot of our clip art and stuff, and we could really come up with some cool things, reasons why we would split them, in one fashion or another. Oh, sorry, I got the hiccups. And go from there. I'm going to get a drink of my Yeti cup. But we could really have some fun with it. Let's see if we can find another example for splitting. Let's go into our modeling here, and I'm going to delete all of these components. And let's go into our clip art, and let's take a look at, let's go to decorative. Let's grab this guy right here. And let's get rid of our past vector lines. Let's get this guy sized up. And I'm going to take a polyline tool, and I'm basically going to, let's make sure my model is centered. I want to center my model on my material. Let's make sure it's centered. There we go. Take my polyline tool, and I'm just basically literally coming right down this center line here. And with model selected, the vector line selected, go into my modeling tabs, and I can split that. And now I have essentially two components, two halves of a component. I could, you know, this could be one half, this could be another. You can split in so many ways, left, right, diagonal, it doesn't matter. With those two components separated now, let's take and make sure they are at the same height. And once again, almost like what I did with the horses, I could come in here let's get that rectangle centered on the material. So we should be evenly spaced all the way around. And I could go in to my, oops. What in the world did I do? Bear with me a second. There we go. My create shape tool, and let's go into our 3D view here. And I could go ahead and build up a shape. I'm going to go up to 0.4. Let's go 0.375. Oops. Make sure that it's merging. Let me go up a little bit more. Close enough. And so once again, you know, my components, I'm just going to duplicate those. The 3 new duplicates will be highlighted, and I can just grab the highlight and drag them down to that level 1. So they're there. That's my master copy. And then if I didn't bake these 3 together, and I just went right into my sculpting, it's going to say automatically, it's going to say the components must be baked before editing. So, you know, baking is going to be required. We're taking all those three individual components, and we're turning them into one component and everything. And we want to make sure, you know, I like to twiddle my view to see kind of where I, you know, get, you know, kind of where I want to be and stuff, to see what areas I need to clean up. And with that, I don't need a big diameter. You know, I can just come in here and start to, you know, well, we can make it a little bit bigger diameter, a little bit stronger on the smoothing. And smooth that out. Let's go back to normal on that. Want those nice smooth edges. Square my edges back up. Okay. All right, with that, I can now come in and, you know, of course, I'd probably clean that up a little bit better, but you know, now I have this plaque with this model on both sides, kind of giving it this leaflet look. I could do some kind of nice little scripture or something in there. So really, you know, there's a lot of creative ways that we can use a way to split a model. Now, again, splitting a model is an Aspire feature, and so a lot of people ask, you know, is it worth Aspire? Is it this or that? You know, I have VCarve Pro. Is it worth the Aspire? You know, and everything. You get a lot of cool tools, a lot of cool things that you can do within the Aspire software. I'm not advocating. I'm not saying go out and spend money. All I'm saying is there's going to be a lot of things that we can do in Aspire that we can't do in VCarve Desktop and Pro. So for all of you that are sitting there, you know, that have the Desktop and Pro going, man, that's actually pretty cool. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to do that. I'm sorry, until one day, if you ever upgrade to an Aspire or something, then you'd be able to do it. But as far as slicing a model, like we did with that skull, and being able to create those 3D models and slices and things like that, everybody can do that. Desktop Pro and Aspire. It's built into the modeling tools and stuff. But there's some really cool things that we can do with the split on components and stuff, and have some, you know, real fun with it and all. Now, I said that it's actually gonna be not too long of a class. There's not a whole lot to it. I'm gonna go open into Q&A for a moment, but I want to share something with you. I mentioned about the embossing tool. The embossing tool is this guy right here. Reduce the height of a component whilst retaining the surface detail, right? So basically, every software, Desktop Pro and Aspire, has the scale Z height of a model. You know, if our model's too thick, we can scale it down. You know, we can scale it down to fit in our material stuff. But when we scale it down, we sacrifice some of the detail of that model. Well, Aspire has not only the scale Z height, but they also have what's called the embossing tool, which basically scales the Z height of the model whilst retaining the surface detail. And I want to take just, you know, it's 8:30. You know, there's not a whole lot to go into with slicing models besides some Q&A on some different things and all, but I want to take this moment and I want to emboss a full 363-dimensional model for you. To show you that process, just to kind of show off that tool. The emboss tool for me is fun for creating low relief carvings. So like carvings that we would get from designandmake.com, from our clip art gallery and things like that. Those are low relief carvings, you know, 3D or 2.5D carvings. A 3D model is not typically designed to be low relief. So we can emboss it to make it low relief. And I want to just show that. I want to take just a moment to show that to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this out. And I'm going to come in and create a project board. Let's go into our drawing tools here. And I'm going to increase my project size to, let's go 24 by 12. Click OK. And I'm going to go into my modeling tools, and I'm going to import a model. Now these models here, they're not typically designed for low relief carving. And this one's going to be a Camaro, a car. Now this is a big file, so it's going to take a moment for that Camaro to come in. But this lesson here is not necessarily about the embossing. This is also a lesson in orientating our model. So this the screen that's about to come up when we orientate our model, this screen that's about to produce itself here in a second, because this is a big file, the orientation, how we want this model to face and look and everything. We would do that if we have Desktop Pro or Aspire and we bring a 3D model in. You know, we import a 3D model file, we have to orientate it. And so this next step is all about orientation. But then I want to show you the embossing function. So let's give this a second. I don't know why I do this to myself. I should have sized the model down. It's huge. It's like thousands of inches by thousands of inches. I should have sized it down long ago, but I still haven't. Now, down the road, you might see some cups like this for sale. You never know. If you guys are interested in spindle DB cups with your custom name on them and all, we may just do that. Be a great way to support the channel. All right, so let's look at this model now, this Camaro model here. I'm going to look at it. I always look at a model when we bring it in. We always look at it in the Z plane. This is like if we're looking at the top of the board down. And that, if it was a low relief carving, would not be a very appealing carving. Why would I want to see the top of a car, right? You know, that doesn't do anything for me. Now, imagine if this board was on a teeter-totter and this was the front and this was the back, or actually the bottom's the front and the top is the back, right? Well, if I come over here to orientate this, if I click on front, imagine that board tipping backwards and the bottom of the board being the front coming up. So if I click on front here, it's going to click on, it's going to orientate itself, and I'm looking at the back of the car. Well, don't want to do that. I want to go to the back over here. Now, when it flips it, imagine that teeter-totter flipping the other way. Now my car is upside down, and that's fine. I can work with that. But I want to see the front of the car, so we want to be at the back. It was just the way the car was orientated in there, whether it was front, back, left, right, things like that. So now we're at the back, so we're at the front, but now I need to rotate about the Z-axis, and I need to rotate a full-on 180 degrees. Flip her around there, Junior. There we go. Now my car is orientated properly and stuff. Now my car is 1,119 inches, or 1,019 inches. Let's size that down a little bit. Let's get that around. Let's go 18 inches. And click apply. Get it down to a reasonable size here. Now I'm going to center that model. Now here's the kicker with embossing. Okay. If I went into the Y plane, of course, we just talked about the looking at it in the Y view in the zero plane. If I center it, half the model is below the surface or the Z plane and half of it's above it. I want this whole model on top of the Z plane. So I want to slide that Z plane down, which basically brings the model up to the top like that, like it's teetering or balancing on its tail end here. And now, now I'm going to come and look at this at the Z view. I'm going to go back to the Z view here with that model up at the top. And now, imagine if I was carving this, that wouldn't be an attractive looking orientation for that, that model. I want to see a nice maybe side profile or something along those lines and stuff. So now I want to interactively rotate this model to get it orientated just the way I want. So let's go ahead and I'm going to do the Y first. Interactive rotate along the Y, and as I move my mouse left or right, you'll see the car start to turn. The model start to turn and everything. And so that's pretty good there. The X, if I bring my mouse up and down, I'm going to bring it down just a little bit, just a click and a little pull just to bring it down. Now I'll go ahead and center that model, and once again, get it on the board and stuff, and get in the zero plane. Now my model has changed orientation and stuff, and now it's different size. Remember, I just sized it down to 18 inches. Well, that was 18 inches looking at it front on. Now I've got it tilted, and it's 30 inches wide. Well, my board is only 24. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to size this appropriately. So I'm going to go, let's go 21 inches. 21 won't work. I need to go 20. There we go. Click apply. Now I've got this orientated in a way that I think if that was a low relief carving looking like that, that would probably be a pretty cool carving, in that orientation and stuff. I get to see a little bit of the back, the sides and all that stuff and everything, and it'd be pretty cool. But watch what happens now. When I create this model and everything. Now, mind you, remember, let's look at this in the Y view. It looks normal, right, in the Z view, but let's look at it once again in the Y view before I click OK. So let's look at it in the Y view. The car is now tipped up and it's tilted and it's balancing on its tail end here. So let me zoom out so you can see that on that zero plane. So imagine now if I were to create this model, all of this empty space under the tail end here and over here under the wheel and all imagine, what does the software have to do to create that? Well, it's got to put wood there. It's got to put wood there. So when I click OK, when this model comes in, it's going to look crazy. It's going to look super insane. And when you're embossing a model, really it's the same steps for every model you bring in and stuff when I'm embossing a model. But now if we look at this model, I'm going to kind of, let's get oriented and stuff. All right, so now this model looks crazy, right? Because the software had to let it unpixelate there. Come on now, it's still a pretty good size file. But the software had to compensate for that, it had to put wood in there and everything. And I'm not gonna carve this like this. I'm literally gonna flatten this thing out like a pancake. And I want to, but I want to keep the surface detail. So what I have to do to emboss this model to make it a low relief carving, because right now it's not a low relief carving, but what I have to do to make it look like this is I need to create a duplicate of it. So I'm going to right click and duplicate it. Okay. The duplicate is going to be my base. And so I'm going to turn my top off, the car model itself, and I'm just going to have one copy of it here. And on my base, I'm going to use the actual scale Z height of the model, right? This is the one that when it gets scaled down, it loses the detail. I don't want any detail on this. This is the base, right? So I'm going to scale this down. I want to scale this down to, exact size. So let's come in here, and I want this to be 0.625 inches thick. So I'm going to scale that down. Now, of course, when it scales down, right, no surface detail, right? But basically think of this like the base of the model. Okay, so let's get this kind of up in the screen here, and let's tilt it to the side. And so this is just the thickness. This is what gives my model thickness and all. So that 5/8 of an inch thick. But there's no surface detail whatsoever. Well, now I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to close out of this tool. And now I'm going to turn that off. That's my base there. I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to come turn the other copy, my duplicate, on. Turn that on. And this one is going to be scaled using the emboss tool, reduce height while retaining surface detail. Now, the trick to this the trick to the emboss tool is if I emboss this, I want to emboss this model down, and watch what happens when it embosses. It's going to look like a bunch of spikes and all. It almost looks like a DeLorean right here, right? Like the Back to the Future car. But it's got all these spikes and everything there. What the goal is I want this scaled down to 1%. Bam. Just slide the needle down to 1%. So this model right now, this thing is paper thin. Okay, it's paper thin and everything, but it has all the surface detail and stuff. And so now I could do a little bit of smoothing here, but don't do too much smoothing in the emboss tool. Save that for after you put the two components together. Then you can smooth the model out. Now, I do have some fender lines and things like that, poly lines and stuff and all, and I could smooth. If you're going to smooth, I recommend, not any more than 10% in the emboss tool. You smooth it out a little bit. Then we can do most of the smoothing after the fact. So I'll bring this up to, let's say 90% smoothing, just to get a little bit of smoothness in there. And I'm going to click OK. So now I have two components here. I have this paper thin model here that has got all the surface detail and everything. And then I have my base. Now, hopefully by now you've learned about when you add a model, when you add one model to another, when you add, not merge, but when you add, that top model takes on the shape of the model below it. So think of if I had a sheet in my hand and I draped that sheet over my car, that sheet is going to contour to the shape of that car, right? Well, our embossed model here is got a combined mode of add, which is what we want, And we're adding that to the base, the flattened out model that gave us height. So now I have a model that has some meat to it. It's not thin. It's got some meat to it, but it also has detail. So now that I've embossed the model and everything, I can go in here and I would most likely always bake these together. I'd never create the original because there's no going back. But I would bake those together into one model. And now I would go in and add some smoothing. Let's apply a smoothing filter to this. And I'm going to turn the smoothing up a little bit. Kind of get some things smoothed out. I don't want to smooth too much. I don't want to lose too much of the detail or anything like that, but I do want to smooth it out some. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And so now I have this model that I wouldn't have been able to have. You know, it was a 360-degree car that I pulled off for free, a Turbosquid and all. You know, it wasn't intended to be a low relief carving. It was intended to be a, you know, a 3D model carving that you could 3D print or that you could, you know, slice up or what have you. But I wanted to do, I just want to carve on my table. I don't want to slice anything. I just want to do, you know, a low relief. So using the emboss tool gives me the ability to create this model now. And now I could come in and I could, you know, create my 3D rough cut. Just do the material setup, make sure my model's in the position that I want it to be. I'm going to give it a little bit of a 10,000ths of an inch there. Click OK. And so I'm going to do my rough cut, 1/4 inch end mill. I'm going to use the, I'll use the material as the boundary in this case. I'll carve it all. Unless I wanted to cut the car out, right, and hang it on the wall. Let's do that. Let's do the model as the boundary. I'm going to let it go past the boundary by 1/4 of an inch. A little bit more than 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to calculate that. So that'll create that rough cut, you know. Go through and create that rough cut toolpath and everything. Almost there. Probably should have turned down my simulation quality. Alright, it's rounding the bend now. It's doing that rough cut. Alright, now I can come in and create my finish cut tool path. I'll use an 1/8 inch ball nose on this. There's not a whole lot of detail on that. So let's go in here and tapered ball nose. And let's click the material model as the boundary. I'll let it go past the boundary a bit. Let's go 0.127. Raster it back and forth and calculate that out. Actually, I didn't. Hold on, let me stop that. I don't need a boundary offset on that, so let me just calculate that. And then I'm going to go back and have the software create a vector boundary around that so I can do my profile cut. And now I've got a cool little, you know, car plaque or whatever to hang on the wall. So embossing, I just wanted to show that tool because it's we were talking about 3D models and slicing models and stuff. And while we were in the Aspire, many of you may not have known about the embossing tool, you know, that's in there and everything. And I wanted to just give you a little bit of a show and tell on that. So it's a pretty cool functional tool. And man, I can go on Turbosquid and the free models and stuff and download some really cool models of airplanes, cars, buildings like the Empire State Building or cityscapes and things like that or what have you. And I can emboss them and create some really cool models from them. Doesn't cost me anything, you know. Uh, really neat. All right, so that is almost done, and I'm going to turn down my preview simulation quality a little bit. We'll just go with a high, and we'll preview that toolpath. And last but not least, as soon as that finishes up there, I'm going to go ahead and select my model. I'm going to have it create a vector boundary around that selected component. I'm going to go into my 2D view and select that vector boundary, and I'm going to do my profile cut, cutting all the way through my material. Quarter-inch bit. This is for preview purposes only. I didn't create any tabs or anything like that because I want to be able to oh wait, how thick is my material there, buddy? Hold on a second. 1.5 inches. So let's try that again. 1.5. I'd probably do this on a 3/4 inch board. I don't know why my board is 1.5 inches, but we'll go with it. All right, so then I have my pretty cool little model that I can hang up on the wall. You know, a wall mount and everything. Let me tighten up that line a little bit. Let me have it offset allowance. I want to go to the line. Negative 0.02, 20,000ths of an inch. There we go. And that would be how you would emboss a 3D model. So, and you know, it's really cool. I'll give you, I'm not going to go into it one more time, but you know, like some of the models, to give you an example of some of the models that I have and stuff. Let me import one more model. We're not going to do it, but I just want to import it in. Import a model. Let's see here. I got the Empire State Building. I got an airplane. I got a Chevy truck. Dinosaur. Let's get the my dino. We'll do my dino. I'm not into skulls, but let me do the skulls and Raven, so you can kind of see that. So this is a statue that you would normally see, like, you know, sitting on a desk or something like. Well, you probably, I mean, normally it's probably not the keyword to use. You usually don't see statues of skulls and ravens, but this is, think of a statue, right? That's the whole point. Think of a statue and everything. You know, 360-degree statue, and I want to low relief carve it. You know, I don't want to slice it. You know, and I could slice it. You know, but I want to low relief carve it and everything. Well, I point this thing in the Z direction. Let's get into the Z view. It's kind of a front-on view there. I'd want to orientate this to the, let's flip it to the back. So I'm seeing the top here now. Now I can interactively rotate it. I'm going to go along the Y or the X first, and I'm going to tilt it up. Tilt it up, and then I'm going to go along the Y and turn it a little bit. I want to see a little bit of the side of the face of the raven. And now it tilted a little bit on me. It tilted, right? And I want it pretty much straight up. So that's the Z. So I'm going to take the Z and I'm going to, tilt that up a little. So I'm interactively rotating this part and everything. Now that I have it, I can go ahead and size it down. So I'll size it down to 11 inches. Click apply. Get it centered on my board. And make sure, it's below the zero plane or above the zero plane. Bring it all the way up. And if we were to look at this again in the Y view, it's tilted. It's kind of pivoted up on its, it's kind of balancing on its edge right there, right? Well, we're going to be flattening that down. So when we flatten it down, we're going to get this view, and everything. So we would come in and do that. So it's really neat. It's really a neat thing. That is kind of fun. Let's close this out and look at this raven. When we close this, look at this raven. It's got that wood built up underneath it as well. The software's got to compensate for all that empty space and everything. So it's got all of that wood and stuff in there. And of course we're not doing. We're not working with that. We're going to come in and we're going to, and I'm not going to create the base. We, create two components. Create, give me a second here. You would create a duplicate. One's going to be reduce the scale height of, just to make a base and make it however thick you want the model to be, 1/2 inch, 5/8, 3/4, whatever the case may be. And then the second one would be embossed. And of course, you got to select the model before you click on emboss. Big files, these 3D model files are, so give it a second. Anyway, all right, ladies and gentlemen, so hopefully that was something neat that you received. While that, I'm not going to create a toolpath on this. I'm just going to boss it down so you can see. Let it catch back up to itself. I kind of locked it up. But hopefully you got maybe some little insight. But slice your models up. Slice your models up. Make some cool designs and plaques and stuff like that. If you have Aspire. Split, not slice. Split those models up if you have Aspire. If you have Desktop Pro and Aspire, slice your models up. Create those 360-degree models, and when you glue them back together, you have your statues and all that stuff. It's just a whole nother realm of possibilities of things that we can do with 3D models that we wouldn't think that we could work with. If I go and download a 3D model off of Turbosquid, you would generally think, oh, I can't work with that because it's not really set up for a low relief carving. Well, I could slice it and build that 3D car. I could slice it up, and of course I'd have to, after gluing everything together, I got glue squeezed out, so I'm gonna have some sanding and cleanup to do. But I'm gonna have a pretty cool model car after that. When it's all said and done. Let my Spire kind of. Bear with me a second. I heard a silent pause there. I done broketed my model. I done broketed it. All right. Well, but anyway. It's hopefully you have whether it comes with slicing or splitting. I like splitting models to create different plaques and things like that. It's pretty cool to do. The ability to split a model is pretty awesome for things like horse plaque, or if I wanted one thing to be on the other with some kind of saying or something in the middle. It's really neat. But embossing, that's just another fun tool that we don't really know that much about. We don't deal with, that much. It's there and everything. But boy, I really locked up my Aspire. That's the first. That model file is huge, so it's probably it's battling itself right now. I'll get it to respond here in a second. But anyway, while this is messing around doing what it's doing, any questions about anything tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Because we're going to wrap it up. It's 9 o'clock. That'll be the first time I end somewhat on time. But any questions about anything that you saw tonight, or about Vectric in general? Anything that I can answer for you for the last 10 minutes of this, go through and answer any questions. If not, cool. But I appreciate you hanging out with me to take a look at these three tools, actually. They're pretty cool tools and neat to do. Although I did lock up my Aspire. I'm not going to go through the trouble of close it down. And I locked her up. I wanted to show that too, man. It sucks. It would take a second to do it again, but I think you guys get the idea. You guys and girls get the idea. But if you have any questions, now's the time to ask, and I'd be happy to answer them. Yep. So I'm working with Sam Engel. We're going to be working on some cups and all. But now this is vinyl decals on the cup and everything. And they look beautiful and all. But Sam and I talked about laser engraving to get the same effect and everything. And when we do that, when we explore that a little bit more and all, I will have things like this for sale on Spindle TV, and if you want one, get one with your name on it, because we can customize them, and it'd be a great way to support the channel, right? Hint, hint. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, fun stuff. I love that cup. I like it. The Spindle TV logo came out pretty spiffy on there. Yep. But looks good. And I want to thank Sam Engel, love of my life. I want to thank her for making that for me. That was a nice gift. All right. So, look at there. It popped in. I knew it would right at the end. So if we bring that down to 1% and everything, we now have our low relief carving, though without the base, right? It's pretty much paper thin right here. That's why we create that duplicate and create that base and everything. But now we have our low relief carving that was once a statue. So really cool stuff. Yeah. Don't know what I would use skull and raven for, but hey, it's something, right? All right. I want to thank you, everybody. And I don't see. Oh wait, how about wrapping an STL model some night? Wrapping an STL model. Kevin, let's talk about fourth axis and wrapping next Monday. This Monday coming. There's nothing to it. It's just like this. Right now, if I had this model here set up as a rotary job, let me get the model sized down to fit on my little spindle there. In my 3D view, you see my model here. Oops. my little flat model, if I turn on the wrapping, which looks crazy because there's no meat in there. Hold on a second. Let me get how thick is my material? Hold on a second. Center Allen. Let me set this up properly, and that might help along. That's more like it. Yep. So if I were to create my 3D finish cut on this, it's a very thin model, but what the heck, let's use the model as the boundary. Calculate that out. And if we were to preview that, you know, you see how low it is in the model, right? That's why I was getting that little bad wrap and all. So in our material setup, that model needs to be on the surface of the cylinder, not at the bottom, on the surface of the cylinder. And when we wrap it, you'll see that. Let me flip it around here. You know, that model would be wrapped. So if I were to now create that 3D finish cut, let's reset that out and preview that little toolpath. Very light model, right? You know, it's just an embossing and everything. But if I come in here and wrap it up, you know, let's turn that ring light off. It's basically, let it regenerate. It's pixeled right now. Let me zoom in there. Basically takes that model and wraps it around the cylinder. So everything that we do in a flat plane, Kevin, when we're wrapping, it takes that model and it wraps it around that cylinder. So there's nothing to it. There's not like a magic trick, and everything. You know, it basically takes that flat model design and it wraps it around in that cylinder. But we'll get into that. We'll do that Monday. I'll create a project. We'll wrap some 3D models and stuff and all that. Well, that'll be Monday's class. Sounds good. All right. Michael, it stopped being locked up, Buddy Rowe. This is that's the model. Or that's the grayscale of the model, should I say. Let me go into the 3D view. Let me get zoomed in here. There you go, Michael Parrish. That's what it looks like after it's embossed. Yep. All right, so yeah, we'll do that Monday. We'll wrap some models Monday and talk about that little fourth axis action going on there. And yeah, thank you, Sylvia. You could tell I had a cold, huh? It sounds a little nasally. Yeah, I got a head cold, guys. That's why it's kind of a simple class night, showing off some of the tools and how we would, work with them and stuff. I couldn't get too detailed in because my mind is just swirling with misery right now because I got a head cold. All right. Well, everyone, I really appreciate your time. I've said this like 100 times. Thank you for joining me each night. We will be back on our regular schedule Monday night class this Monday coming. And I hope you all have a great weekend. And until next time, I'll see you soon. I want to thank you for joining us tonight on Spindle TV, your best source for CNC CAD/CAM training videos. If you're watching Spindle TV on YouTube, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. You can find out more information about our training and products by visiting us at www.digitalwoodcarver.com.